correct pronunciation is Gallagher, so we'll get it right here. Everybody butchers that ever since I've been a kid and everything, been Googler, Goggler, or whatever, so.
So what is it?
It's Gallagher.
Okay.
Leave the H silent.
Like the P is
And this is what got me started into ham and really interested in radios. Was I was in the 9th grade in woodworking class, and if you remember the old Allied Electronics, he had one of the new catalogs there on his desk, and I got looking at all of that, and I got interested in that. So I asked him if I'd take it home, and he said sure, and I got Dad in there, and he said, well, do you think we can make it? He said, well, we can try. Well, both of us didn't even know the difference between a resistor and a capacitor and everything. Well, we got it going, and I'd listen to the ham radios, shortwave, and all that, and that's what got me interested in the radios and stuff. Until I got to working with this guy here at McDonnell Douglas, K5LLC, Gene Joins. When he passed away, I eventually waited until the time period, and I got in and got the vanity, and I got his call sign. But for a long time, I was N5 WBK, which the wife and kids wondered, why in the world do you want to change? Well, I wanted my old Elmer. So what happened was, way back in the 20s, two people by the name of Yagi and Uda started making the Yagi antenna designs. And in World War II, they finally took off on the radar airplanes, and if you see some of the old radar airplanes, they either had it horizontal or vertical on the sides. So that's what started in people wanting rotors. But the hams, the first rotors weren't built for hams. They built for TVs. That's some of the first ones there was TV rotors and everything. Alliance was in it, high gain, or well, not high gain, but it's CDR at that time, got into it, and they started making the TV rotors. So you see some of the designs there. The first Bell rotor was that TR2 and stuff. And it kind of looked like this right here. You can tell the difference between the old Bells and the newer type Bells. So that's how you can tell the difference when it's one of the old ones made back in the 50s and stuff. But it started coming around in 48. Why the TV rotors picked up was because they started making the TV antennas bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So that's what started the rotors out for TVs. High gain, or CDR got into it. Alliance was one of the big ones and stuff. Here's some of the stuff here.
They are 22.
Yep, they are 22.
Still have one.
Yep. And then they had these looking like one of the old motors they put out there in front of the boats now, the little electric ones. Kind of looks like one of those little motors there, but that's how the TV rotors first started, looking like that. Then you had some other small companies started coming out with TV rotors. That's some of them there. And there's the AR1, the AR2 type one that CDR had, which I've got a book up here. I've got history of a lot of the old rotors and everything. I'll come by afterwards and look at some of this stuff there. But that's what they came out with. CDR started, Alliance started some like that. And there's the old TR4, which your TR4 was an 8-wire too, like the newer high gains, but the wiring was all different and everything in them. There's some of the other ones there. There's another one. And the Ham-M. The Ham-M came out in 1957. And it came out with an old box that kind of looked like this brown one right here. And stuff. So they come out in 57. Your Ron Towers started out right after World War II in 48, but the 25 and the 20 didn't evolve until the late 50s before they could the hams picked them up. But originally, Ron started out for the communication type ones, commercial type. So, and then the hams went over that. As usual, all of us hams always take stuff. But you always get into, is it called rotors or rotators and everything? So you get into that. One of the little columns I got up with, it says if the antennas can focus an antenna, they need to be able to focus it in a desired location. So that's why we come up with the rotors. But is it a rotor or a rotator? Hams are not very precise with slang and jargon, as we know, so both words are used referring to the same. A device that aims an antenna in a specific direction. Nevertheless, there's a proper usage. A rotator is a device that causes something to rotate. In this case, a mast with an antenna attached to it. A rotor is a part of the device that rotates, such as a motor shaft or armature. If you want to be correct when referring to the gadget, then you use to aim your antenna, call it a rotator. That guy liked to use that. But I always said, if you look on my Facebook site, I said, if you want to call it a rotator, rotor, it's kind of like tomato and tomato and stuff. So I've always, for over 50 years, known it as a rotor, so I call it a rotor. But if you look on my thing, I got a Facebook page, I got in there, well, let's just be a good colonist and butcher the King's English and call it a rotor. So if you want to do it that way, but you can call it either way. We still know what they are. But that was one of the first ones that came out for the hams, was a ham M. And I've still got the original thing that came out with them and stuff for the tearing them down and working on them. So all the parts, there was another one right there. Then you start getting down to all the big ones and all of that, but that was one of the first ones. You start out, some of the medium grade ones came out, was the old TR-44s, which is a medium grade, just a step down below this. But if you ever wonder, this is just half of a ham M. It's got the same part of that.
No break.
And everything, except there's just no break.
Yeah.
But you look at them too, when Highgate went in with these on the TV rotors too, this has got, it's the same kind of race as this, but they only put every other bearing in for a 44. So the ham M went in and they just filled the whole thing up. So when I go back and rebuild, I put the whole thing in. That takes care of this wobble here, a lot of that. So that's how I overhaul the 44s and make them better, or the 45s, they're newer type. But the ham M's, but you all got different kinds of rotors and everything. These people here, distributors, make those big ones right there, which if you look, the high gain at 1000 looks similar to that other one. So they were saying when I was reading about this, that looked like the same Wilson rotor. Wilson, I don't know what happened to them. They got bought out. The company bought them out and did away with their antenna stuff and everything. So Wilson rotors went on down the road somewhere. Alliance shut down back in the 90s. Alliance just quit making them and stuff. So there's the old Alliance rotor there. That was one of their popular ones, but it don't have a brake in it really to hold anything. And so you can still get them around. Some people still repair those. But when you get into the tick ring rotors, this fits around the rotor there, or the tower there, and the rotor sits up there, and you got boners up there, and they turn it around that tower. So you don't have to have it up the top and a rotor inside. You can just stack them down. Your contesting stations, which is probably what this is, have got all the different antennas and the rotors and rings down here at a certain level, and they can use those in their contesting. They can use different rotor boxes, or one rotor box will turn several rotors they make, can turn those. And there's a little closer view of the motors on there and everything. The worm gear motors they use. And there's another version right there. That way you can just, I've noticed a lot of the hams have used these in the big contests and the big towers when they want different ones. And there's one where they can turn the rotor inside that ring and use the ring for the guy wires. They'll put a prop pitch motor at the bottom and it'll turn that whole tower around instead of just turning the antennas.
Are those generally more expensive than the systems like these?
Oh, a whole bunch, you'll see here in a minute. And there's the prop pitch motor at the bottom of the base that'll turn that tower. That looks like about a RON 45 maybe or so size. And there's the bigger prop pitch. They took these off of motors back, the props off the old motors, airplane motors, in the 50s and started using these, the hams did, as the other ones were still being commercialized. So they got the big old prop pitches on there. And then this one here is made by M Square. And it is a big one, and it is over $2,000 if you want to buy one. And so they will turn a house almost on those and stuff. So they're a little bit better than the high gains as far as the power and cranking and everything.
Does it have a weight limit on it?
Yeah, we'll get into that here in a minute. I'll take questions here afterwards here, but here's another one of those worm gear drive ones that'll turn the antennas and stuff up there. And there's DX Engineering came out with one here, and it's pricey too, but it'll
Do
turn.
they actually have it out now?
Yes, it is out. It's in their catalog. And that's the only one they've got. They don't put M squares in there anymore. They put the high gains and theirs, and that's it in their catalog. They'll sell an M square antenna, but they won't sell the rotors for some reason. And here's some of the control boxes they make for them. Green Heron's got one. Some of these boxes here that they will work with about 2 or 3 different antennas up there into our rotors. And they go on to that. But the high gains came out and the Ham 3 came out shortly. But the Ham 2s, the only difference was, what happened was when the Ham 2 came out was, these old boxes like this, a fire came out in the company and burnt the mold up. So instead of going back and trying to make a mold, that's when they came out with this box here. This is the original Ham 2 box. And that's when they came out with the separate controls up here and everything. But the wiring is point to point in there for everything. So when the Ham 3 came out, what they call a 3, very same thing here. The only difference was the box. The box came out, instead of point to point, they put a printed circuit board behind the meter. So they took everything off, they had point to point down here and put it in a meter box. So then the 3 came out, they made 2 different colors. They came out with that cream and the black. Then when the Ham 4 came out, they came out with the plastic box, which is probably cheaper made than this one was. But the Ham 4 came out with a better braking system. It had, instead of that knife point wedge, it came out with a little groove on it, and the grooves were bigger around here. And they took the steel ring gear like the tail twister had and put the ring gear in there, steel ring gear. And High Gain now has quit making that aluminum cast ring gear and went to steel because it's cheaper to make now than the aluminum casting. I took one apart here. This one here I did for a customer, and that aluminum ring gear was in 3 pieces down there. And I always had trouble with them when it finally hit that little point on the lever. It would just mash that lever over and everything. So they start making the levers better too. But High Gain has improved. I know a lot of people badmouth MFJ stuff, but the High Gain stuff has improved a lot. And I hadn't had any trouble with any of the new MFJ stuff or anything, but they can knock MFJ on their other stuff, but as far as their rotors, I hadn't found any difference in the type of the rotors for the quality of their service